Red.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
Is it on? Does it turn it on?
No, it's on.
Are we there? Yes. Those who are at the front lines in cancer research and ensuring that we have the cures for the diseases and conditions that are consuming so many of our fellow Americans and fellow human beings in so many different ways. This institution, this community, this student body, the leadership that we have here is an example to the rest of the country. And for that, I am grateful, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to address you, and most importantly, to listen to you, to learn from you, to answer your questions. I have no hope of earning your vote or your support. I have no prospect of effectively serving you as President of the United States of America if I've not first shown up, listened to you, sought to understand from your perspective and from your life the issues that are most exciting, most challenging, the opportunities, the threats, the promise that we hold as a country, and the way in which together, regardless of any difference of geography, of party, or anything else, we come together to confront them. Whether that risk or those challenges are an economy that works too well for too few, but not well enough for everybody else, school teachers who may be graduating here from this college who are unable to earn a living wage, working 2 and 3 jobs, though they have the most important job in front of them, unlocking that lifelong love of learning from every child, from every human being inherent to us. Whether it is a healthcare system that allows people in this country to die of diabetes, of the flu, of curable cancers in the year 2019 in the wealthiest, the most technologically, medically advanced country the world has ever known, because we have failed to form the political will to deliver the care to those who need it, who, if we do, will do better in their lives for themselves and their families, but will also do better for all of us in the things that they were born to do. If only they were well enough, they would be able to achieve. In a democracy that does not have the full benefit of every single one of us, some people drawn out of congressional districts based on their race or their ethnicity, others not able to vote because they cannot prove their identity. In Texas, you're able to use your permit to carry a firearm to show who you are at the ballot box. But in Texas, you cannot use your ID at Paul Quinn College or Texas Southern University to prove who you are at the ballot box. 50th in the nation is where we ranked before 2018 in voter turnout. Not because we love our democracy or civic responsibility any less than anyone else, but because people were drawn out of a congressional district, a reason to vote, therefore their democracy based on the color of their skin, their ethnicity, their country of national origin. We lose out on the full genius and the ability to fulfill our promise when not everyone can participate in this democracy, when it has been corrupted and captured by special interests, by corporations, by a concentration of wealth and privilege and power that we have not seen in this country in more than 100 years. If we are going to combat the crisis of climate change, which will consume us if we fail to act in the time left to us, the scientists say 12 years before these wildfires and floods and droughts and humanitarian disasters affect more of our communities, then we're going to have to bring the will, the resolve, the creativity, the ingenuity, the innovation of every single one of us to bear. Democracy is the greatest single mechanism humankind has invented in order to do that. But our democracy today is broken. We must fix it first before we can fix this country and confront the challenges which I just enumerated. In order to do that, we free ourselves from the influence or the perception of influence, from that concentration of wealth, from those corporations who have purchased legislation, elections, and our democracy. It's why in this campaign, we're not taking a single dime from a single political action committee. That's why when we work on issues like healthcare, you will not see us taking money from the pharmaceutical companies. When we work on issues like criminal justice reform, we will not be taking money from the private prison industrial complex, which has a profit motive to keep people locked up for more time. That's why, when it comes to climate change, the only interests that we are going to represent are yours and the people of the future, our kids and grandkids, who will disproportionately bear the brunt of the consequences of our action or inaction. We want to make sure that every single one of us can live to our full potential, lead the lives we were born and intended to live. If we want to make sure that we get the absolute most out of everyone, all of us must see a future in this country. And right now, because of those conditions that I just described, that is not the case. A country that supports the largest prison population on the face of the planet, disproportionately comprised of people of color. A country that is arresting people and putting them behind bars for possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal in more than half the states of the Union. For possession of that substance, not just doing time, but checking a box after graduation on any employment application form, saying you've got a conviction, making it less likely that you're able to get ahead. No longer eligible for student loans or grants or scholarships to pursue higher education here or at any institution of higher learning and excellence. That same criminal justice system has failed to show any accountability for those corporations, Purdue Pharma, for example, who have sold opioids into this country, who are responsible for the death and devastation of people and communities. We're 4% of the globe's population. We consume 85% of her opioids. So many, in fact, almost everyone buying heroin or fentanyl on the street began with a legally prescribed prescription, and that company, who knew full well the addictive properties and yet sold it nonetheless as a non-addictive miracle drug to prescribers and doctors, has faced no justice whatsoever. We have to make sure that no man, no woman, no corporation, no special interest is above or below the law. All of these things, in my mind, are connected. From our education system, to our healthcare system, to our economy, to our system of criminal justice. And to meet those challenges, it is our democracy that has to ensure that every single one of us can participate, that will be up to that challenge and allow us to reassert our leadership on the global stage. For all of those reasons, I am here today. For all of those reasons, I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. And for my desire to make sure that we are a match for this moment, that we're up to the challenge, that we make those people of the future proud of who we are, the people of 2019. I look forward to listening to you, to trying to answer your questions, and leaving, I hope, a better candidate and a better public servant going forward. Thank you for having us out here today. Very, very grateful. Thank you.
Okay, on to your left. Right here.
Cynthia back here with the orange microphone. If you'd like to ask a question, make a comment, make a statement, love to hear from you.
As a 63-year-old middle-class female, I want to make a note to the Democrats. It is getting to be too much. We are getting too divided. Divided, we will fall. Together, we will stand. I want to say that. We are getting too divided. I feel that way, and a lot of other Democrats feel. It is too much. I know the reason we're doing it is to get the one that's in office out, but we are getting too divided. Our camp is getting too divided, and we got to stop. That's one thing. The other thing is, I want to just get a reality check with the candidates. Are you really mentally prepared for the stress and the anxiety of 24 hours of constant whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever your children say, if your dog barked the wrong way, all of that is, if somebody bumped their toes, it's your fault. But it's not only the United States problem that you got to deal with, you got to deal with the world problems. A note to the candidates. Have you ever noticed that everyone going in there with black hair coming out with gray hair? So go ahead and dye your hair before you get in there, because when you come out, your hair's gonna be white. It is too much. So as a Democrat, we want to do the right thing. We want to get the right person in office, but you got to just be a check and understand. It is a lot to consider. Your family got to go through. You got to go through. Everything around you got to go through. And right now, we got enough people that done come out to say they're going to run. We don't need not one person to come back and say. And I'm a retired registered nurse, and it's just getting to be too much. We're going to mess around and divide and divide and divide until we're going to lose, just like we did when Trump won, because we too divided. So we need to just stop it. It's too much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here for the question. Listen, in answer to this question about whether we are mentally prepared, I'm mentally prepared to do this. These last 8 days has been a real pressure test to try to answer that question. All the states, the communities that we've been to, the people we've listened to and heard, the articles that have been written about us, the nasty stuff that you see on Twitter. It really is a check on yourself, your head, your ego, and your self-confidence, and that of your family, your friends, and everyone who comprises this, which we hope to be the largest grassroots campaign in our country's history. When you add to that a president who is the smallest, the meanest, the most vile and vindictive, who describes Mexican immigrants as rapists and criminals, who wants to ban all Muslim travel to this country because perhaps he believes Muslims are inherently dangerous, who calls Klansmen and Nazis and white supremacists very fine people. He seeks to divide us, to stir paranoia and anxiety, hatred, hate crimes in this country up every single year for the last 3 years. The violence that comes from the words, something that we need to be mindful of. And then we have an example to treat each other in the way that we expect the President of the United States to work, to see the best in one another, to not define ourselves by our difference, to bridge the divides between us of geography, of race, of gender, of country of origin. Whatever that is, it's not as important as our opportunity to do good for one another. And that gets to the other question and point that you made. This is as divided and as polarized and as hyper-partisan as this country has been in my memory. When I ran to represent my fellow Texans in the United States Senate this last year, I went to each one of the 254 counties. You could not be too blue and too urban for us to show up. It was not going to take you for granted. You could not be too red or too rural for me to write you off. We showed up. King County voted for Donald Trump 96% in the last election. But I showed up in King County because I hope you would agree they're every bit as deserving of our respect, of being heard, of being fought for, of being served. I want to make sure that I understood things from their perspective because I wanted to serve them regardless of who they voted for before or who they vote for in the future. And I got to tell you, I think there may be something to that way of campaigning. Though we lost by 2.6%, there were 2 safe Republican seats that are now held by Democrats, Lizzie Panel Fletcher and Colin Allred. There are 17 African American women elected to judicial positions in Harris County, literally changing the face of criminal justice in our largest city in the state and the most diverse state in the country. Bringing people together by listening to one another, by showing respect and civility, decency and dignity, we can get this country back again. So thank you. Thanks for the example that you set in your question. Appreciate it.
Hi, Beto. I'm Dana. I've been following you a long time, so I'm excited to be here. I drove up from Savannah, Georgia. And this is a good setting. I don't know that these people have realized it yet. But can you talk about college loan debt? Because that's something that I struggle with, having graduated with a master's 3 years ago. I'm still paying on student loans, and they get resold. And I know you've touched on this before, and maybe these guys haven't started paying those back yet. But can you kind of talk a little bit about what you can do to help us with some of the burden of student loan debt?
I think everyone here is well aware that we have a higher education system that makes cost a barrier to entry, and loans and the crushing debt of repaying those loans a drag on your ability to get ahead in life and a drag on this entire country's economy. $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. The average graduating senior will have $40,000 on their back, and that is just an average. So some tens of thousands of dollars more. In the first place, let's stop digging the hole Let's ensure that if you are career ready from your high school, we connect you to an apprenticeship, a community college that you get to go to without taking on a dime of debt, a trade school. Let's make sure that if you're going to a public and publicly financed four-year university, you're able to complete your college education without taking on any debt. Yes, it is an additional investment by the American taxpayer, but yes, it will produce a return far greater than the initial investment and the cost to make sure that everyone can better themselves. And then HBCUs. I know from listening to President Sorrell, Paul Quinn College, listening to President Clark here, going to TSU in Texas, Prairie View A&M, produce so much value, not just for the students who are here, but for the country that benefits from them. And I enumerated some of those benefits that I learned from President Clark. It's why I supported additional funding for HBCUs in my last year in Congress, up 14% over the previous year, and hundreds of millions of dollars to HBCUs that were damaged and affected in floods. When you hear all these proposals for making higher education more affordable, let's ensure that HBCUs have a seat at the table, are part of the conversation, and a fundamental part of what we fund going forward for every American. Thank you for the question.
Okay, straight down the middle. Over here.
What are your thoughts on police brutality?
I think it is a part of a larger set of inequities, systemic racism in this country that is manifested not just in the criminal justice system. And I mentioned the war on drugs that has become a war on people, and a war on some people more than others, where though Americans of all races use illegal drugs at the same rate, smoke marijuana at the same rate, only some are more likely than others to be targeted, to be patted down, to spend time in jail. We have a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline that starts at 5 years old in kindergarten, where if you are a student of color, you're 5 times more likely to be disciplined, suspended, expelled as a white student in the same classroom in front of the same teacher for the same infraction. We are setting people up to fail. Some of those students will begin that first year, that first day of kindergarten, 10 months back in reading comprehension, 12 months back in math. They may be the students who are the sons and daughters of parents working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet, who do not have time to read to their child because they are not home, they're out working before that first day of first grade or kindergarten. A healthcare system with gross disparities in outcomes. The infant mortality rate between white families and black families is greater today in 2019 than it was in 1850, 10 years before the Civil War began. 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America. Though black America, those who can trace their family back to the slaves who were brought here in bondage, literally built the foundations and the wealth in this country, though they enjoyed none of the fruits of their labor. When you add to that the aggravating factor of redlining, preventing people based on color, where they live, from obtaining loans and capital to buy homes, to start small businesses, to invest in their child's education, I begin, and only I begin, because I've not led a life like those who I'm talking about. I've not led your life. I'm a white man who's had a privilege in my life. I'm not enduring any one of those things that I just described. But I have listened to those who have. And I'm listening to you today. And they have taught me both what we are up against, going back to the very foundation of this country, and what persists today, the consequences of slavery and segregation and suppression. This all comes into the question that you ask: why are unarmed black men being killed by those who were sworn to serve them, protect them? Whether it is the war on drugs, the inability to obtain capital in a capitalist economy, generate wealth, pass that on, this education, healthcare, or criminal justice system, all of it comes to a head, and so much of it causes people to lose their lives. So in the immediate aftermath of that, yes, we need accountability for police officers, those who have the ability to wear a badge and have a gun, also have the accountability that each of us must face in a country of laws where no man or woman or corporation is above the law or beneath the law. We must tie federal funds to our local sheriff's departments and police departments to full accountability, transparency, and reporting for use of force. Many of these shootings seem to be violations of civil as well as human rights. There should be federal civil rights investigations as well. I think this country long ago learned that a person's human and civil rights transcend local and state laws. It becomes a national issue. But I do not want to lay this at the feet of police officers when we look at the system within which they operate, the laws that we have created, and the wars that we wage on people within our own country and within our own communities. So these are some of the ways that I would approach answering your question and ending the use of state violence against people within our own communities.
In this otherwise crowded Democratic Party, where there have been a lot of candidates that have come out to run, what is going to be your strategy to stand out and also to face the president's belittling on Twitter and his own type of strategy?
It's going to be hard to contrast myself against the field because I really am not running against any of them. And I know that come summer of 2020, we're all going to be on the same team, behind the same nominee, ensuring that they defeat Donald Trump, but also ensuring that day one of January 2021, they're prepared to lead, that there is a movement and a country behind them to face these challenges. I will just share with you that in my hometown of El Paso, with good friends, able to start a small, high-tech, high-wage, high-skill business, employing my fellow El Pasoans in a city that did not have enough of those kinds of jobs, served on the El Paso City Council, nonpartisan position, delivering for my constituents. Every one of the 6 years that I was in Congress, I was in the minority. The only way to get anything done for those veterans I served on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, those service members deployed that I helped out on the House Armed Services Committee, the people back home who were counting on me, was to find a Republican colleague and partner to bridge the divide, to compromise a little bit, though it's a four-letter word among some, find that consensus that would allow us to get something done. I just ran a race that I mentioned in Texas. Went to every one of those counties, listened to everyone without ever asking, what party do you belong to? Who did you vote for last time? As I mentioned, though we did not win that race, we helped, and we only helped, but we helped to produce a change in our politics and our democracy in Texas. I hope to run a campaign like the one described by the person who asked the first question, that's positive, that's unifying, that seeks to bridge these divides. I don't want to, and I don't think whoever the nominee is should, succumb to the temptation to return in kind the smallness, the pettiness, the personal attacks of the president. I want to keep this elevated, focused on our ambitions and our goals, and producing the resolve and the courage and the imagination to make sure that we achieve those goals. So that is my path in the race. It's a little bit about me that might be different from other candidates, and that's my commitment to do this in a way that is ethical, that we can all be proud of, and then it prepares us to serve on day one of 2021. Thank you for the question.
All right, we have time for a few more.
Hello, my name is William Fairfax. I'm a junior at Claflin University. My question is for you. There are 28.8 million small businesses in America, and my father is a small business owner himself. But yet constantly we keep seeing wealthy corporations and huge businesses getting tax breaks, and at the same time small businesses account for 99.7% of the businesses in America. What are we going to do to help out? What are your plans to help out small businesses across America?
Thanks for the question. So as more corporations have consolidated more of the economic activity and growth in this country, you've seen dynamism in the rest of our economy. Small business growth and expansion suffer as a result. If you go back to the end of World War II, returning GIs, almost 50% of them started a small business. You come to the wars after 9/11, the number is 4 The last time we had a Gilded Age in this country more than 100 years ago, progressives like Teddy Roosevelt sought to break up the concentration of wealth and power, these trusts and monopolies, so that more Americans, folks from every walk of life and every community, could start their own businesses and ensure that we grew this middle class, created more opportunities. So I think a breaking down of this concentration through the tax code, which, for example, just gave $2 trillion, much of it flowing to those corporations who are already sitting on record piles of cash, which flow to the wealthiest in this country, reversing the worst excesses of those tax cuts. I mentioned earlier, ensuring that capital gets out to those who can use it to start small businesses or grow a small business that they already have. I think that's worthy of a federal investment in growing more SBA programs that help small business owners, especially in populations that aren't reflected commensurate to their share of the population overall in small business growth and creation right now. So these are a few of the ideas through the tax code, through breaking up these concentrations of wealth, to getting more capital to small business owners that ensure that more people can take part in this economy's growth. Thank you for the question.
Okay, these are my last two questions.
Hey, how you doing? So it's a two-parter, so let's squeeze it in. Those in the LGBTQIA+ community have disproportionately been targeted. Violent crimes, unfortunately, the loss of their lives. What will you do as president to counter the violence ensued upon Black trans women and gender nonconforming folks? And part two question is, what are your thoughts on the Democratic DACA agreement with the Republican Party, and how are these thoughts infused in what you will do as president to ensure the safety of DACA recipients?
I'm going to take your second question first. More than 1 million of our fellow Americans who are dreamers came to this country at a very young age, are as American as anyone else in any way that matters to me. Not only are learning in our institutions of higher education and K through 12 classrooms, but they're teaching in our K through 12 classrooms and in our institutions of higher education. Not just being served by those whose lives are on the line everywhere around the world who are deployed tonight, but they're serving everywhere around the world deployed tonight. I think the best, most American way to respond to this opportunity, and it's not a threat, is to free those dreamers permanently from any fear of deportation back to a country whose language they do not speak, where they no longer have family, where if against those odds they get ahead, they're going to benefit that place, that community, not this country, not Orangeburg. So U.S. citizenship for every dreamer allows them to contribute to their maximum potential. It'll benefit not just them, it'll benefit this country. Cannot come at the cost of deporting their parents, the original dreamers. Their immigration status in this country must be fixed. They must be able to enter a path to citizenship. And then we're going to have to lift the visa caps that we've got. Right now, when we ask someone to get in the back of the line to come to this country, to join family, to work a job, sometimes to go to school, they're waiting in a line that lasts 20 years long. Having the benefit of their genius, their talent in this country, their ability to join their family, contribute to our shared success is in everyone's interest. And this is not something that has to divide us along party lines. Republicans and Democrats alike see the wisdom in this. But a 2,000-mile, 30-foot high, $30 billion wall, sending the United States military to the border at a time of record low apprehensions and record safety in communities like mine in El Paso, taking kids from their parents after they traveled 2,000 miles, show up at our front door in the most desperate, vulnerable position that they can possibly be in. None of that can be or continue to be the answer to these challenges. Let's make sure that we meet this opportunity, not with fear, not by provoking anxiety and paranoia and hatred and racism. Let's meet it with our confidence and our boldness and in the best traditions of this country. That's the answer on DACA. The first question was about. Sorry, let me answer this one as well. In Texas, It's perfectly legal to not hire somebody or to fire them if they work for you based on their sexual orientation. In Texas, it is a legal defense to kill somebody if they come on to you in a bar and they are of the same gender. In Texas, there are 30,000 kids in the foster care system and child protective services. Recently was so under-resourced and understaffed that some of those kids were sleeping in the CPS offices, under the desks, on top of the desks. In Texas, you can be too gay by law to adopt one of those kids who needs a loving home. That's why, as president, I will sign into law the Equality Act, which guarantees the full civil rights of every single American, regardless of their orientation, their sexual orientation. And in addition, I'll address this crisis in violence perpetrated against Black, trans women in this country, where those crimes are reported and often are not followed up on, where some lives based on the slow pace of justice are not deemed as worthy as other lives. Everyone deserves justice. Everyone deserves protection. If we don't, the implicit message that we're sending is that it is okay to visit violence among some based on their orientation or based on the fact that they are transgender. That cannot be us, and we must begin with the words we use, the rhetoric with which we speak about our fellow Americans. It's got to be about lifting people up, not demonizing, vilifying, or tearing people down. Thank you, Charles, for the question.
This is our last question.
Question I have is, I heard in the news that they were trying to get rid of the electoral college system. They're back and forth on it. How do you think that might affect the voting system, especially for Americans who don't typically vote as independent, or do not choose to vote as independents?
Thank you for the question. The most recent example of the challenge that you are describing is the 2016 election. The loser got 3 million more votes than the winner. I still don't totally understand that. It doesn't make sense to me. I was talking to somebody today who had a great idea on how to address this. He said, what if in every state, those electors that are selected through our national elections are selected proportionate to the popular vote in the state? In other words, no state would have a winner-take-all system. It would force candidates. If I were the nominee, it would force me to show up to every state, not to write some of those states off as too reliably red or blue so that they do not count. Everyone should have a seat at the table. If you had to go to those different congressional districts to compete for those electoral college votes, every single state would see candidates of both parties. And everyone's issues, everyone's communities would count for that much more. So that might be a solution to pursue to ensure that our elections make a little bit more sense, and that person for whom you vote actually wins that election if they win more votes than the other. So thank you for the questions on the Electoral College. Appreciate it. Okay, Cynthia's saying that was our last question. Thank you so much for having us out here today. Mayor Butler, President Clark, Representative Ott, everybody, thank you for having us out. Very, very grateful, and look forward to coming back. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Charles.